December 26, 1996, a 6-year-old beauty queen vanished from her own home while her family slept upstairs. 8 hours later, her father found her body in the basement. What happened in those 8 hours would become America's most controversial unsolved murder case. And after analyzing the evidence for decades, I can tell you why this case still haunts every detective who touches it. They call me detective. What I'm about to share with you is my professional analysis of a case that destroyed a family, divided law enforcement, and proved that sometimes the most obvious answers are the most impossible to accept. At 5:52 a.m. on December 26th, Patsy Ramsey made a frantic 911 call from her Boulder, Colorado home.
911 emergency. Police. What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry. Patsy. Patsy. Patsy.
Her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was missing, and she'd found a ransom note demanding $118,000 for the child's safe return. The kidnapper claimed to be part of a foreign faction and threatened to kill JonBenét if the family contacted police. But Patsy had already broken the first rule by calling 911. Within minutes, the Ramsey house was swarming with police officers, friends, and family members. What should have been a sterile crime scene became a contaminated maze of footprints, fingerprints, and disturbed evidence. As an investigator, this immediate contamination would haunt the case forever. Here's what 25 years of investigating kidnappings teaches you about ransom notes. Real kidnappers write short, direct demands. They don't compose 2.5-page manifestos in the victim's own home, using the family's notepad and pen. The Ramsey ransom note was unlike anything I'd seen in my career. It contained movie quotes, specific instructions about delivery methods, and even wished John Ramsey good Southern common sense. Most telling was the ransom amount, exactly $118,000, which happened to match John's recent Christmas bonus almost to the dollar. FBI behavioral analysts immediately flagged this note as suspicious. Real kidnappers don't sit in victims' homes writing novels. They grab the target and run. This note was written by someone comfortable in the Ramsey house, someone who had time, privacy, and intimate knowledge of the family's finances. At 1:05 p.m., after 8 agonizing hours of waiting for kidnappers who would never call, John Ramsey made a discovery that changed everything. In a basement room the family called the wine cellar, he found JonBenét's body. The scene was horrific. The 6-year-old had duct tape over her mouth, a makeshift garrote around her neck constructed from nylon cord, and a broken paintbrush handle, and her hands were loosely bound above her head. The paintbrush came from Patsy's art supplies in the basement. But here's what bothered me immediately. This wasn't a kidnapping gone wrong. The staging was elaborate, almost theatrical. Someone had spent considerable time constructing that garrote, applying the duct tape, and positioning the body. This was either the work of a sadistic killer who enjoyed the process, or someone trying very hard to make a murder look like something else. The medical examiner's findings painted a disturbing picture. JonBenét had died from asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. In simpler terms, she'd been struck in the head with tremendous force, then strangled with the garrote approximately 45 minutes to 2 hours later. This timeline is crucial for any detective analyzing the case. Someone had time between the head blow and the strangulation. Time to think, to plan, to construct an elaborate crime scene. This wasn't a moment of rage followed by immediate remorse. This was calculated staging. The autopsy also revealed undigested pineapple in JonBenét's stomach, indicating she'd eaten fresh pineapple within hours of her death. This detail would become critical because investigators found a bowl of fresh pineapple on the kitchen table with a spoon. The family claimed they didn't remember giving JonBenét any pineapple that night. Detective Lou Smith, brought in to review the case, became convinced an intruder had entered through a basement window. He pointed to a suitcase positioned below the window and argued it could have been used as a step. But here's what my experience tells me about break-ins. Desperate criminals don't write lengthy ransom notes after killing their victims. The supposed entry point showed no consistent signs of forced entry. If someone had crawled through that window on a cold December night, there should have been more physical evidence. In 2008, the Boulder County District Attorney's Office formally exonerated the Ramsey family based on DNA evidence found on JonBenét's clothing. The DNA profile belonged to an unknown male and didn't match any family member. Case closed, they declared. But here's what the DA's office didn't emphasize. Forensic experts later revealed this DNA evidence was extremely limited and degraded. We're talking about tiny amounts of genetic material that could have come from manufacturing processes, previous handling of clothing, or any number of innocent sources. The DNA has never produced a match in CODIS, the National DNA Database. After nearly 30 years and millions of comparisons, this profile hasn't connected to any known criminal. That's unusual for DNA evidence from a violent crime committed by a stranger. Professional investigators learn to read family dynamics during crisis situations. The Ramsey family's behavior in the days following JonBenét's murder raised questions that persist today. Within days of their daughter's death, John and Patsy hired separate criminal defense attorneys. They refused to be interviewed separately by police for months. When they finally agreed to formal interviews, it was under controlled conditions with their lawyers present. This isn't necessarily evidence of guilt. Any competent attorney would advise wealthy clients to protect themselves in a high-profile murder investigation. But it also prevented investigators from conducting the type of intensive questioning that might have revealed inconsistencies or additional information. The evidence in this case is more complex than most people realize. But before we dive into the most shocking revelations, tell me, what's your theory so far? Do you think an intruder killed JonBenét? Or was this an inside job? Drop your detective analysis in the comments below. Your insights might surprise you when you hear what comes next. 9-year-old Burke Ramsey was in the house the night his sister died. Initial police reports indicated he slept through everything: the supposed kidnapping, the frantic search, even the discovery of JonBenét's body. For investigators, this seemed unusual, but not impossible. Years later, enhanced audio analysis of the 911 call revealed what might be Burke's voice in the background, suggesting he was awake when his mother called police. This contradicted the family's initial statements about Burke sleeping through the entire incident. The pineapple evidence becomes more significant when considering Burke's presence. If JonBenét ate pineapple shortly before her death, and a bowl was found on the kitchen table, who gave it to her? The family's inability to explain this detail remains one of the case's most persistent mysteries. As a detective reviewing this case, the investigative failures are painful to catalogue. The crime scene contamination on December 26th destroyed crucial evidence before it could be properly collected. Friends and family members walked through the house, handled potential evidence, and created a forensic nightmare. The Boulder Police Department's inexperience with homicide investigations became immediately apparent. They failed to separate family members for individual questioning, allowed the house to be cleaned before thorough processing, and didn't establish a proper chain of custody for critical evidence. The decision to let John Ramsey search the house with a family friend was particularly problematic. When he discovered JonBenét's body, he immediately picked her up and carried her upstairs, destroying the original crime scene and contaminating any transfer evidence that might have existed. In 1999, a Boulder County grand jury heard evidence in the Ramsey case for over a year. The proceedings were secret, but in 2013, portions of their decision became public, revealing a shocking conclusion. The grand jury voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey, not for murder, but for child abuse resulting in death and accessory to first-degree murder. They believed the parents either committed the crime or helped cover it up. However, District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictments, claiming insufficient evidence for conviction. This decision effectively buried the grand jury's findings for 14 years and allowed the case to remain officially unsolved. Today, the JonBenét Ramsey case remains officially unsolved. In December 2023, the Boulder Police Department announced they were convening an external cold case panel to review all evidence using modern forensic techniques. Advanced DNA testing methods that didn't exist in 1996 might finally provide answers. Touch DNA analysis, genealogical matching, and enhanced genetic profiling could potentially identify the unknown male DNA profile or eliminate it as meaningful evidence. But here's what concerns me as an investigator. 27 years of contamination, degradation, and mishandling may have destroyed the very evidence needed to solve this case. Time is the enemy of forensic evidence, and too much time has passed. After analyzing this case for years, I believe the answer lies in the basement of the Ramsey house on December 26, 1996. Someone in that house knew more than they revealed. Someone wrote that ransom note. Someone constructed that garrote. Someone staged that crime scene. The intruder theory requires believing that a stranger entered the house, spent hours writing a ransom note, killed JonBenét in an elaborate manner, then left without taking anything or leaving definitive evidence of forced entry. It's possible, but it defies criminal logic and investigative experience. The family involvement theory requires believing that parents could kill their child and then stage an elaborate cover-up while calling police and friends to the house. It also defies human nature and parental instinct. This case may be unsolvable, not because we lack evidence, but because the truth is too painful for society to accept. Sometimes the most obvious answer is also the most unthinkable. The JonBenét Ramsey case isn't just about one family's tragedy. It's about the limits of justice when evidence is contaminated, witnesses aren't forthcoming, and the truth becomes too painful to pursue. Until someone decides to tell the complete truth about what happened in that Boulder house on December 26, 1996, JonBenét Ramsey will remain not just an unsolved case, but a reminder that some secrets die with the people who keep them.